Right, is it possible to retire in 10 years starting from £0 in the bank? Perhaps you're not really happy in your current job, worried about doing this for the next 20, 25 years and then never getting to enjoy what you worked for. So I'm going to tell you in this video how you can set up a strategy for the next 10 years so at least you can consider retiring, and a few underappreciated ways and tricks to do this. But I'm also going to tell you the honest reality and the things that I personally think you should be thinking of if that is the case. But let's first discuss some of the crucial aspects of finance that you need to understand if we do have nothing and only 10 years left. Firstly, this isn't going to be easy, and you need to be prepared for that. The biggest challenge we're going to be faced here is we don't have time for investments to compound in a meaningful way. And what I mean by that is if I take £100,000 to someone who is 35 and let that run to 60, even with 3% return after inflation, the time in the market has a huge difference to what you get in the end. Now, if you have 10 years with the same money, look at the difference because we haven't been able to grow that fund anywhere near as much. As I've mentioned previously in loads of videos, one of the biggest advantages of investing early is over the long term, we just have to trust the forward push of the market, and the compounding nature of returns really helps us out. So we have 10 years to the finish line, we're very susceptible to investment returns of the next decade, which we can't really control. Another big thing is going to be affected by this strategy is how old you are. If you're 60 now, then in 10 years you will have your state pension because you'll be there at 67. So there is support which reduces your reliance on investments. However, if you're in your mid-40s wanting to retire in your mid-50s, we need to not only be planning for a much longer retirement, but also the fact that your state pension will be kicking in much later. So the younger you are and you're wanting to do this, the tougher this is going to be because you have a much longer time to provide for. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be going over mainly a mathematical exercise, a sort of rule of thumb, what you need to do, what you need to be thinking about, understand what you earn, what you spend, and what we can optimize. And then I'm going to throw all that out and I'm going to tell you what I think you're missing and what most people are missing when they make this plan. So let's talk about the key techniques that any financial planner is going to be talking about. One is effective tax rates. Basically, how much tax efficiency can we squeeze off every penny we can get using tax efficient structures. Two is maximizing contributions. Very similar, but how much we can realistically achieve based on the expected income. All right, next up is asset allocation. This is what we need to be thinking about if we're getting our money to work. How much risk can we take? How much return could we expect? And finally, a hidden secret. I'm going to tell you what I really think you should be considering if you want to retire in 10 years from zero. I'm going to have a 55-year-old single person earning £60,000 a year with a mortgage paid off in 10 years. So I'm going to say they pay £750 towards this mortgage, and then their expenditure drops to £1,750 a month. So look, while the income targets are going to be clearly estimated, I've not just pulled them out of thin air. It's actually in line with what's called a moderate lifestyle as defined by the retirement living standards. So you may argue that 60k salary is too high, but the reality is a 30k salary is about £2,000 per month after tax. So the savings levels aren't even possible with those earnings and that expenditure I just mentioned. Okay, so I think the first thing we need to consider is what should we expect as far as asset returns, because at the end of the day, the growth rate that we're going to expect is going to have a huge impact. The problem is that we can't accurately predict this. We have a good idea based on market pricing, but we have to take an educated guess because markets don't listen to what we think is going to happen. So let's have a quick look at some examples. So this is from JP Morgan, which goes over the expected, and I underline expected, returns from different asset classes in the next 10 to 15 years. As you can see, they expect Eurozone large cap, I don't think I can ever say that, just over 6%. Japan under it. You've got, interestingly, UK large cap just over 4%. And I think probably most interesting, US large cap based on current valuations at just over 3%. So as you can see there, US large cap isn't expected to deliver a great amount of growth going forward, according to JP Morgan. They're not the only person who've got opinions, though. If we have a look at Vanguard's overview, we can have a look at roughly what the expected return are on different asset classes from that as well. Now, I'm going to go to British pound. I'm going to assume we've got an unhedged position based in sterling because our liabilities are likely to be in sterling. So as you can see, they're slightly more positive on UK equity, somewhere between the range. Well, I say that, depends what side of the range you consider. but somewhere between 3.8 and 5.8 as far as expected returns. Global equities somewhere between 3.6 and 5.6, and then obviously you've got bonds below. So what I'm going to do for the purposes of the model, which I'm going to bring up now, is I'm going to assume just a 5.5% return on the basis that the reality of the matter is if you've got somebody who is wanting to retire in 10 years, we are going to have to take a level of risk to get a level of growth. So here is the first initial plan. We've got somebody, I've called him Mr. Magoo, who is at 57. Interestingly, it coincides with the current state pension age of 67. 10 years to go. What can we do? So just to recap, we had the earnings of £60,000. We had expenditure currently at £2,500 per month, conveniently again, till 67, when the mortgage drops off, and I've assumed the mortgage is at £750 a month, so dropping to £1,750 in retirement, which actually isn't too bad considering the fact that he's got no pounds at this moment in time. Also assuming he's got full state pension as well, and all these figures are after tax. So what I've done in this example is I've basically just assumed that they put every single spare pound they can into their pension. And why? Well, basically the truth is it's the most tax efficient way to do things without getting into much more high risk investments. So it makes sense unless you've got somebody who's really experienced, but I can't imagine if you've got someone who's got no investments, they're going to potentially tick that box. So in this one, I've basically gone every single pound. I've also assumed a 5% employer match, by the way, on contributions on their salary, earning £60,000 to 67 and then stopping entirely. And the figures sort of work, only just. But if we consider the individual's life expectancy based on their current age, at 57, if it's a male, their average life expectancy is 84. Female is 87, because women tend to live a little bit longer. But we would never plan for averages, and I don't think it would be good at planning to assume that you've got somebody who is just going to live to average life expectancy, because what if they don't? You're going to be in big trouble. And as you can see here, there's actually a 1 in 4 chance that that person's going to reach 92. So would you want to take that gamble having no money at age 92? Okay, so this looks okay, doesn't it? But what happens if there's a market crash? So here I have modelled basically at 67 that there is a market crash similar to what we had in 2000, and I've actually exactly modelled, I'll just put the portfolio up now, an equity-based portfolio, 100% equity, reasonably well diversified, and I've assumed at 67 they go into the years 2000 onwards as far as the stock market, which were quite challenging times. We had the tech bubble burst, and then not shortly after that we also had the great financial crisis. So not fantastic times for the markets. And as you can see, we're basically running out of money on this projection at age 90, which, considering they've got a 1 in 4 chance of getting to 92, wouldn't be great. So there is a key thing that I think we should be thinking about. So in this book here called 100-Year Life from Linda Graffin and Andrew Scott, they talk about how in the decades to come, due to increasing healthcare and technology, the issue that we're going to be talking about is one that many will face. And it's going to be really hard to fund a retirement if a lot of people end up living 100 years old.
One of the most fundamental facts about living to 100 is if you live to 100 and you save a normal saving rate and you want to retire on 50% of your final income, you will be working until you're in your late 70s, early 80s. And that's just a fact.
It's going to be really hard for people to fund retirement if all those things converge and people have much longer life expectancies. And if I'm being honest, I think we can already see signs of that in the workplace. People who used to have a job for life and would retire and get the company watch, that's kind of gone now. The situation is it's very realistic for people to move various firms across their career, and I don't think that's changing anytime soon. Retirement, if I'm being honest, probably isn't the best word, as it has connotations of stopping everything and retirement homes. And of course, when health gets in the way, that makes a difference. But I always want to talk, when I'm talking about clients, I mean saying, look, this is the time where you can choose to work or not on your own terms. Okay, so just to kind of come back to that now, what would happen if we slowed down and instead of basically saying to Mr. Magoo that you are going to fully, go flat out and work absolutely, work yourself to death for 10 years, save every single penny you've got spare, What happens if we had a different view and we actually said, well, hold on, after what I've just told you, what would happen if we decide to take a different structure where we reduce a day a week from age 62? So basically you have a better work-life balance from age 62 to 67. And then from 67 to 72, you're going to need to plug that gap somehow because we haven't got that much money. But what happens if the last 5 years from 67 to 72 that you just worked 2 days a week? So here on the incomes, we're basically going from 60,000 for the first 5, 50,000 because you dropped a day a week, and then finally the last one is just 25,000 for the last couple of years, which is only working 2 days. So as you can see, we are actually in a much better position overall. Not hugely, but I would argue you've also given that person potentially a lot better work-life balance. They have dropped a day 5 years earlier than they potentially were going to originally. But let's have a look now at the same market crash that I modelled on the other example. And as you can see, while it's not ideal, we've got funds lasting with the same scenario up to age 98 now. And the reason for that is basically what we've done is we've reduced the burden for that individual in the earlier years of the retirement. So ultimately they are less susceptible to the drawdowns because they were retaining that level of income. So here we have a potential to hopefully improve their work-life balance, have a better chance of a longevity of the fund, and also reduce the impact of some bad performance in the early years of retirement. The downside is that they would have to potentially work slightly longer to fulfill that. But the question is, what is the best outcome based on what's right for you?
Really, in my view, I think you should be thinking about sort of a third act of life, where the ideal is that we have a position where you're fulfilled, active for as long as possible, but get to live on your own terms. This is mentioned in the fantastic book on retirement, Changing Gears, which I definitely recommend having a read of. So my question here is, look, if the finances aren't great, we're starting from zero with potentially 10 years before you're like, right, that's it. Is there any option that we can rethink what your retirement goal actually is? Basically, instead of the financial focus being relying purely on our assets and stopping entirely, is there any way that we can keep a stream of income going where you can get engagement and enjoyment from life? But look, there's no two ways about it. Being able to retire well relies on understanding of our pensions and not making big mistakes. Now, luckily for you, I've just made a video on 3 retirement mistakes that most people make, which, come on, you've got to watch if you're thinking about retiring. See you next time.